that the sun shines down its power to all the world and makes the wind blow strong as it will. I want to hope gentle rains can fall upon the land, so lovely earth can stay lovely still. I'm just going to start in, and I'm welcome everybody to the Energy Week special. This is George Harvey, Tom Fennell, Joan Bownman, Becca Balint, and Jeanette White. These three young ladies are all running for office as senators, and so they're competing with each other for 2 seats, and I'm hoping that at least 2 of them will be successful in that. There are a few other people who are also running for those same seats, but these are the 3 who happen to be here today. And so if you when you hear their views being expressed, remember that they're competing with each other. So what we're going to do today is I'm just going to ask them to get into a big tussle with each other about the future of energy in Vermont and climate change.
Keep the fisticuffs up to a bare minimum.
All right.
But keep them up there.
Well, it's hard to move around much with these
okay, I guess
things
you're
on.
going to have to avoid it.
Yeah.
Okay. But Jeanette, why don't we start with you?
Okay.
If you want to say something about the future of energy in Vermont, the future of maybe climate change.
First of all, it seems to me that the efficiency is the most important thing we can do. That the energy you don't need to produce is the energy that you don't use.
Yeah.
So I think I said that backwards, but however it is,
you're getting your point across.
Okay.
I say that Efficiency Vermont is one of our most important utilities.
It is, and now it seems to me that what we need to do is focus on, and we've kind of tried it in the past, but it hasn't been successful, on an all fuels efficiency in the same way, because Efficiency Vermont is just electricity. So if we can set up a similar program for all fuels efficiency, I think that would be helpful. And then we need to, I think we need to have everything on the table. We need to have the wind, solar, methane digesters, both from landfills and from agricultural. We were talking earlier about the agricultural, the biodigesters, and we have worked really hard to change to allow more anaerobic digesters on farms in Vermont. And some of the problems are, I mean, there are problems that sound, it sounds easy to have the solution, but then you get into the thing, we don't have a lot of large farms.
Yes.
So you have a lot of small farms that are scattered around, and they don't produce enough manure to actually do that. But you can't transport manure from one farm to the other. It's really hard because it's wet. Yes. And it weighs a lot, and so it's wreaking havoc with the road. So how do you do that? And it costs more to transport than it does to. So we need to figure out ways of maybe drying it first, and that I don't know how that works at all. And we've been working on that for a while, and I don't have any solutions.
One thing that puts me to mind of is that there's a very, very large facility, and I'm talking about 250 million pounds in British money that's going up in London to take waste from restaurants and hotels. And they're putting that into a biodigester. Maybe we could do something like that.
Well, we do have a couple compost places.
Yes.
And there's one in Montpelier, a big compost facility. I think transporting of food waste is less expensive and it's not as heavy as transporting manure.
Right.
And part of the methane recapturing is from drying it out. So if you dried it out first,
Can I ask a question, George?
Absolutely.
How many biodigesters are now operating in Vermont?
We were talking about that earlier. I think it's 15. I thought it was 13, but George said it's 15.
This was something that I looked up because California is getting its first biodigester. Got it this week. They're way behind us.
Yeah.
And the potential there is incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
have 1,000.
I mean,
Of course.
their first biodigester is for a herd of 2,000 cattle.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, no, we have, I think it's, but, which is more than we have large farms. I don't remember how
They
many
have-
large farms there are in Vermont,
I don't know.
but it isn't very many. Most of them are the medium size. A large farm, I think, is identified as one that has over 1,000 cows,
Okay.
and 1,000 to 250, I think, is a medium, and then below 250 is small.
Yeah.
So I think those are the numbers. It's
Farmers I knew had 9.
yeah. Well, the majority
I've
of
got
ours
some,
are
I know some in Brookfield that have
one.
one.
They probably don't do a lot of selling of
No,
milk.
no, they don't. But it's
But-
still a big commitment.
Right.
To have
Oh.
one cow. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I grew up on a farm.
Yeah, you
and
know.
yes, every morning, and
You had cattle.
my grandparents had cattle. We had just the cow that we milked for our own purposes, and the chickens
nice?
and the pigs that we killed for our own purposes.
Purposes.
Yes, for our own purposes, for our freezer. The-
Survive.
yeah,
survive.
but yeah. So I think that the other thing that I know that this is I don't know if this is the same as what you think, but I've always thought that we needed to look at systems that don't require so much transmission. I mean, smaller, instead of large facilities that then you have to transmit.
The word is distributed.
Distributed, that's what it is.
That's right.
They're transmission lines, but distributed is the word. You're right.
Distributed power.
Yeah. So
Distributed generation.
we need to focus on smaller, more regional facilities.
Generating facilities.
Generating facilities that can serve. I mean, and that's like the methane digester in Westminster.
Uh-huh.
It services about 150 towns. I mean, it produces enough to do about 150 homes. Not towns, 150 homes.
Okay.
So that doesn't need to go into the grid to go all the way up to Rutland or wherever and back
Absolutely.
again.
Absolutely.
We could have, and I think that Green Mountain Power is starting to think about how to look at that and do some research on it.
One of the things we've talked about here on several occasions is microgrids.
Yeah.
Small collections of localized grids that may or may not be connected together.
Right.
And if something goes out, you still have power here, and you can run some to the town next door, but if everybody's not out of power.
Yeah, and you might want to have some connection. I mean, just because of the possibility of sharing
Yeah.
when something goes out in one place, so that you could.
Yeah.
And so I don't know a whole lot about biodigesters, so I'm just going to ask a bunch of questions if that's okay. So
Yep.
in terms of the energy that is then produced from this biodigester in Westminster, how is that power then transmitted to those 150 homes?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't go to those 150 homes. It goes into the grid.
Okay,
It goes
I
into
just
the
wanna
Green
make
Mountain
sure.
Power
It
grid.
does, okay.
It produces enough to power
To power,
150
okay.
homes,
I
but
wanna
it
make sure I
isn't.
understand.
Right. So it goes into the grid. I think I'm right here. It goes
Yeah, you
into
are.
the grid,
That's right.
and then
It's all part of the whole.
Right,
It's all
and-
part of the
energy
whole.
that's-
And the way most of them have worked in the past is that it's net metering. I mean, it's a
Sure.
form of net metering.
just
So
wanted to
then
make
the
sure I
farmer
understood.
gets a check every once in a while. The way the Westminster one did it is they get a regular check every month. It doesn't, so some months they may produce
Sure.
more and some
It's
months
like
less,
evens
but
out
it
the-
evens out.
Yep.
So, and then they use the leftovers, or whatever you would call them, for bedding and for compost, and it's a great use of, instead of just dumping it all in one of those big pits,
Yes.
which we have in Vermont, the
Yeah.
great big manure pits, and the
Yeah.
sides collapse and
They make a mess.
they make a mess and they
Underneath
smell
the
and
local
And it's a problem with the
water system.
water
yeah,
systems and
yeah,
water.
yeah.
The typical output of a biodigester is two things. Although, as you said, you could do bedding. One of them is electric power, and the other one is compost.
Yes, compost.
So this is something in which everything that's produced is usable.
Right.
There's no throwaway from this.
Yes.
And it's really a remarkable good system. And I don't know how many we could have in Vermont, but we could get a substantial amount of our power from it.
Well, we at one point set a goal of 25-25. So 25% of our power by 2025. That was, when I was on the Ag Committee, that's what
And that is
came up
25%
from agricultural.
Really?
That was
I didn't
That is
realize
a
that's
lot.
25,
That's ambitious.
25.
I didn't know that.
Yep.
I should
Yeah.
be paying it better attention.
Well, I'm pretty sure that,
You gotta
you know,
follow
I have to
Pope
tell you, it was a long time ago, but that's what I remember,
When you
25
throw-
by
When
25.
you throw municipal waste in with that and food waste in with that, that's a substantial amount of power that you can get.
Right.
And it's free.
And it's free. Well, somebody's
Sort of
got to
free.
invest in the
Yeah, but
infrastructure.
you're not paying for the fuel.
Yep.
But so we need to make sure that we have loans, grants available for people, which we've done. VITA has a special fund available for ag
One of the-
purposes.
One of the things that comes to my mind about that is if you have a farm that is producing enough for 150 homes, one way you could finance that would be to have the 150 homes invest in it.
Sure.
And then have a cooperative where everybody gets that check. And the farmer would be basically selling manure to a co-op. And then
Yeah.
there are many ways of doing that.
Yeah.
Right.
One of my favorite stories is a town in Belgium, I think it was Belgium, wanted to put up a wind turbine. You remember that? And
Not yet.
they decided they were,
It needs a little more. Give me a
they
little more.
decided they were going to crowdfund it. They needed $1.5 million. So they opened up the crowdfunding and they closed the crowdfunding when they got the money 20 hours later.
Wow.
20 hours.
$1.5 million in 20 hours. And, that could happen in the United States, too. We're not poor here.
No.
I'm curious, George, what you think about the governor's plan.
Okay, tell me about the governor's plan.
Well, the whole renewable energy, 90% from renewables by 2050.
I think we're going to be way out ahead of that. I think it's going to be closer to 95 by 2035 or 2040, because the market is moving in the direction. Market always moves in the direction of what's least expensive. Right now, wind power is the least expensive source of power we've got in this country. And as a matter of fact, yesterday, I think it was, the DOE announced that or the day before yesterday, the DOE announced that their analysis of wind power in 2015 found that the average price of contract power in the U.S. was $25 per megawatt hour from wind. That is 2.5 cents per kilowatt hour. Just think of that.
Are they projecting that for 2015, or that already happened?
What happened in 2013.
13, okay.
And of course, in Vermont, solar power is the cheapest source of power the average homeowner can get to. But I shouldn't be talking. We should be going to you and Becca.
No,
So,
Oh, I'm enjoying this a lot. And I think this is not, for me, it's not an area of expertise that I have. And I
Okay.
think there's a lot of commonalities that we all share in terms
Yeah.
of our views. I know one of the things I've been thinking a lot about this week is just with the passing of Jim Jeffords. And what
Yes.
was his last big push? It was climate change.
climate change.
It was climate change. And when I go out and I talk to voters, there is somewhat of a split. When I say younger voters, I mean, under 50.
Okay.
And those over 50,
I'm
climate change.
middle-aged then.
Well, exactly. Well, that's a great place to be. But the number of people that said to me, climate change is my most important issue. And I
Right.
think that hasn't really gotten out as much in this election yet, in this primary election, that there are quite a few people for whom this is the critical issue of this generation, the millennials. They are very concerned about what we're doing to address climate
Right.
change. And so to bring it back around to, here is Jim Jeffords. He was talking about this years ago.
Yes.
And we are still fighting this battle of,
Right.
is this important or not? And so
Right.
I feel a new sense of urgency this week. And I'm so pleased that we're all here to talk about this, because I think it is something that we all agree on, that we do need to be setting ambitious goals
Well,
for Vermont.
what I tell people is I think that climate change is going to be an issue for the 21st century, which is as important as the combination of the First World War, the Second World War, the influenza epidemic, the Great Depression, the coming of radio, television, the personal automobile, the computer, you know, on and on and on, because it is such a focus.
Yeah.
And I also tell people that I think that although we're going to pay a terrible price in terms of species being lost, but I think that people 100 years from now will be more healthy and more happy than we are today.
And I think too, for me, really reading up on this issue in the last few weeks, realizing that the Agency of Natural Resources put out this white paper in which they predicted by 2080, if we don't reverse things, it's going to feel like Georgia here. That's startling.
Yeah,
You
no
know,
maple
and
syrup.
right, and we know it intuitively when the weather is so weird. We know that this is coming, but to have it spelled out, like here's the graph line, this is what it looks like. It's terrifying, and it is about changing a way of life that we all love and know
Cherish.
as our own,
Yes.
cherish. So
Yes.
it is, So it's this. How do you express that urgency for people who? They don't
believe.
Well, there's the don't believers, or there's the people that feel like, well, how will it impact me in my life?
Do you like the ski?
Or the folks, I'm sorry.
No, go
or
ahead.
the folks that right now are struggling, that we all
Sure.
see and have been
Yeah.
talking to and work on behalf of every day.
more immediate issues,
Exactly.
yeah.
You know, when the guy comes in and says, Joni, I can't afford any insurance, because health insurance, because you all
Right.
know that's what I do every day right now.
Yeah.
And he said I can't afford $25 premium.
Right.
Even if you do give me a $150 deductible,
Right,
and
it's still too
$500,
much.
it's
Right.
too much. I can't
Yeah.
do it. And for that guy, that global change. But I know, George, when I reached out to you about a month ago, and I want to say thank you to Tad Montgomery for getting us
Sure,
in touch, because I didn't know
absolutely.
you before.
Yeah.
I know this guy because we both drive old diesel Benzes. and while his is converted, mine still isn't. I'm still looking for that piece for the transmission, by the way, Tom.
You are still, huh?
I still
Wow.
am. But I reached out to you because I wanted to understand more what was happening in our region.
Yes.
And you were very gracious to spend time with me, and I know Becca and I have talked about this, and of course Jeanette. So for me, having been involved in mentoring young people that are starting tiny businesses, that want to have tiny homes, and are millennials who say, your generation, and everybody knows I'm 63, so I'm,
Younger
baby
than I
boomer.
am.
I'm a definite baby boomer
But it
at the
makes you
front
a young
end.
woman
But
as
they're
far as
saying,
I'm concerned.
Me too.
what are you going to do? Because are we going to have to push you guys from behind? We millennials, like Becca was saying. Jeanette, you had something you wanted to add?
No, I just was going to say that I think that we all talk a good talk,
Yeah.
but very few of us really walk the walk. And I drove my daughter to. I'm still a little bit tired. Tuesday morning, I had to leave at 3:30 in the morning to get her to the Boston airport. She went back to Montana. And between Worcester and Boston, it was solid traffic. And every blessed car had one person in that car. There's a train going right beside the highway into Boston. So, I mean, we're all driving. We all want to have our our electric food processors. We all want to have our whatever toys we have in the garden. We all want to use those gas blowers to blow the leaves off our sidewalks. I mean, I think very few, until we get it to by talking about it in really broad terms, for me anyway, it's pretty easy to do. But until it gets down, here's what you have to do. You have to leave your car at the park and ride in Putney and ride with somebody. You have to get rid of that, whatever it is. You have to, you can sweep, you don't need to vacuum every day. Well, and I don't know what all those things are, but I know that until it becomes a personal thing, we're not going to make the changes we need to make.
I'm reminded of something that I read in preparation for the Windham Forum. I read their town plan, and they had a very interesting survey in there that they had done of folks in Windham. How did they get to work? Because most people in Windham work outside of Windham, and only 3% carpooled.
Wow.
3% carpooled. Now, and that was their own, right there in their town plan, they said, we have got to do better. And that's just one town's reflection, and that is, that's writ large. But you're absolutely true that we can all talk about better weatherization, we can talk about biodigesters, but how are we changing our day-to-day patterns? Right. And how do you convey to people the urgency around that? Because I feel like whenever President Obama tried to, in the first election, you had a bunch of, eye-rolling Republicans, oh, he's telling us to put on a sweater again, that kind of thing. It was like, oh, really, are we here again? Like, come on.
So I think what I want to say is that I do live live it. Yeah. In addition to having this, hopefully, veggie oil fueled Benz, I drive a hybrid, and I use electricity, and it gets me back and forth Putney. When I left to move to Vermont, I did it to be with my child, who is into sustainable building and design. Went to Yes Tomorrow, got his certificates, but I downsized. I don't use electrical things. I am very, very careful. I rent in an old colonial house that we weatherize. I only eat food locally. I became part of the Transition Town movement, looking at resilience, really concerned about how do we support ourselves in what has euphemistically been called the coming bad times. I have a brother in Westminster, Colorado, who has an acre of food that he is saving for what he believes is Armageddon coming.
Oh dear.
Yeah, I know. Oh dear. Well, I have 5 younger brothers and 1 younger sister, so we each, we have one. The rest of, and gardening and stuff. So I totally understand what Jeanette is saying. But for me, it really is it has to start with Joan Bownman.
Yes.
I have to mirror to people.
Yes.
So I really get what you're saying.
And I think too that we do this thing in Vermont about who is doing it better than other people. Okay, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. And so I had an interesting conversation with somebody last year about what our next car was going to be, and I used to drive an old Volvo 240, and
oh yes,
it went. I know. And so you guys have your love fest going on.
So if anybody out there has one, I want it. But if it's still in good condition,
we rode it into the ground, and but. So
mine has 417,000 miles on it.
You beat me. Mine had almost 300. But, so in thinking about what to get next, I was thinking about, okay, so we live in town. We're going to do all of our stuff on foot as much as we can.
Yep.
But I know that I have 2 kids, and they are going to be needing to carpool. And that's what it means too, having 2 people working. You're constantly moving kids around.
Right.
So what was the most efficient people mover for all of us to fit all those gigundo, as my mom says, car seats? It was a van. It was a minivan that would fit 5 or 6 car seats. And so there are the other people who said, well, that's not efficient. And there are 6 of them driving Priuses there, right? So it's like with 1 kid in it. And so I get it. And I think we need to be better about how we have the conversation.
Yep.
And I also have a dear, friend who's off the grid, but he doesn't work there. He has to drive in to Brattleboro, So it is the, let's try to move beyond the judgment and work together as neighborhoods and towns, or how can we make it more possible for people to do this together?
And what I try to do is show people how you can do it.
I think the neighbors and towns things is important. Jeanette, you were talking about going into Boston. The railroad trains that go by through Brattleboro go to Boston, but there's no train for passengers going to Boston.
Yeah.
And these tracks run all through Vermont, but there's very little passenger traffic going through Vermont compared to what there could be.
There could be a lot more, and I think that over the past few years, the Vermont Rail section of the Agency of Transportation has beefed up a lot, and we've got people in there now who are really committed to putting more passenger service on, and to getting not only on more routes, but more service on each of the routes that
Yes.
already exist.
You
So
could get anywhere in the state for some ridiculously low
$10.
price. Yeah, $10.
They have this great thing for Vermont residents that you can go anywhere in the state for $10.
Yeah,
I think they
that's
still have that.
fabulous.
I know it is.
$12 now.
Is it? It is?
Yeah.
Okay.
Little bit of a raise.
Okay. But
good
still,
deal.
that's a good deal.
It's
You can't-
amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You drive to
it's-
Burlington paying gas for that money.
No.
Yeah.
Good
no,
Lord, you
no.
can't.
And you can get, you can
Not
read a
even
good
in an
novel.
electric vehicle.
I love riding on trains.
I do too. I used to take the train from Brattleboro to Washington and back once a month or twice a month.
Yeah.
It is amazing how fast that trip can be on a train. And I had, for example, a travel agent try to sell me a ticket. I said, I want, the people on the train said, buy from a travel agent. It costs you the same amount of money and they can make money for the local
Right.
economy. And I said, okay, so I went to a travel agent and the agent said, oh, I'll get you a plane. And I said, I don't want a plane, I want a train. And she said, but a plane is faster. And I said, no, it isn't.
Not by the time I have to park in Satellite and
Yeah,
drive to
right.
Hartford.
Right,
And,
yeah.
I'd have to be driven to Bradley by my son, who would then go back to New Hampshire, and it would be the same thing being picked up, and
Yeah.
waiting in the airport and all the rest of that. That train is going about 130 miles an hour as it goes through New Jersey. I mean, we're passing cars like they're standing still, and they're speeding on the interstate. But
And it's pleasant.
and it's very pleasant, especially compared to standing around in an airport waiting room.
Yeah. I know. Yeah.
And so obviously it's not just about will, right? It's about
Right.
money. And how
It's
do
about
you, how do we move that football down the field? There were so many people at the Bellows Falls Forum. It was so clear to me. It was a group of train lovers.
Yeah.
And they really wanted to know that we all supported
Yeah,
rail.
absolutely.
And we do.
Yeah.
There is not
Absolutely.
just the convenience of it, the price, the nostalgia of riding the rails. It's a wonderful experience to ride trains with kids as well. But how do we in Vermont
Yeah.
move? I'm really asking the question. I don't know, where are those funding sources to.
Well, Jeanette, of course, knows.
Senator White will
right.
give us the answer. Yes.
Well, I mean, there are clearly some funding sources from the federal government. There's the Agency of Transportation. We could put more of our Agency of Transportation money into that, but then it's the trade-off: bridges,
Right.
roads, rail. You have to balance it all, and there's general fund money. Those are the sources of money, and then we have the problem that as a lot of our Agency of Transportation money comes from the gas tax.
Right.
So as people begin to drive using cars that don't, so we have to
as much, right?
Right,
And that is-
right.
it's
So we
thank
have
God.
we lose tax money. So now we have to figure out how are we going to recoup that tax money, because clearly it's better to not use so much gas,
Right.
but we need to
Exactly.
recoup it. So we've looked at things like a mileage tax, or and I don't know what the answer is for that, but there's got to be a way of recouping that money, because otherwise those hybrid cars won't be very functionable if we have bridges that collapse.
Yeah.
So it
And we can throw
It's-
in on top of that the fact that we're going to get visited by Hurricane Irene every other year
Yes.
by mid-century, which means we're going to have roads getting washed away like crazy.
And which means that every time we do some road repair, we've got to spend more money than we would have spent before, because we've got to put in different kinds of culverts and different kinds of drainage. So it's going to cost us more
Yep.
to
And I think
do all those.
The road from here to Wilmington, I really expect is going to get rerouted at some point during the century, because it runs along
around
the
the creek.
Whetstone Brook.
Well, most of the roads in Vermont do, actually.
Yeah.
If you look at them,
Yeah.
that's where they go, is right beside.
Beside the rivers.
Beside the
It makes
rivers.
perfect sense because the grade is
Right.
Right,
easy there.
right.
But this is just one of the very big issues that we're going to be facing, and the millennials,
is.
yes, our children, our grandchildren, our great grandchildren. It's a very, very big issue,
It is.
and
Can I ask you a question, George,
Yeah.
about when you said we believe the frequency of storms, the strength of Hurricane Irene will happen, every several years by
yeah,
mid-century?
I
What is it?
exaggerated
Okay,
a little
I
bit
just
there. It's-
okay.
What
But
they're
it is-
saying is more like every 5 years.
Every 5 years.
Yeah.
But by the end of the century, every other year. So this is something that we just have to deal with. We cannot rebuild a road, say we've done it. That was the storm of the century. Because, we're getting hit by the storm of the century every fifth year now.
Right.
And,
So, along with that is looking at the way we do town planning and the planning of the use of our land. We have to have more flood mitigation areas. We have to have places because those creeks are going to flood.
Yes.
Those brooks are going to. Whetstone Brook is going to continue to flood. And so we need to figure out where it's going to flood, where we're going to allow it to flood, instead of just pretending like it's not going to.
That's a very good
Absolutely.
point.
Melrose Park, we didn't expect it to go where it went.
Exactly, it went in
It wasn't in
the floodplain.
the floodplain.
It was in it made its own river right through
the river will do what the river wants to
right.
do.
And so we need to do that in all of our little villages, because most of them are built down like this, and I love the compact development. I think that's the way we should be doing it, instead of expanding.
But not right next to the stream.
But the streams, I know it's very complicated, and in some towns in Iowa, after it flooded there, they actually moved their towns
That's happened
away.
actually all over the world.
But in Vermont, it's a little bit harder to do that because there's no place to move your town. You can't move it to the top of Putney Mountain. I mean, there used to be a settlement up there, and it was untenable, so they moved it down into the village. And so where are you going to move it in Vermont? It's
Good point.
But anyway, it's a very complicated issue, and I'm glad you're talking about it. And
Well, the thing that I'm thinking, and I guess I'm going to be speaking for Tom as well, but I have no doubt that he will agree with me on this. When it comes time for two of you, I hope, to run in the general election, I'm hoping that we're going to have you back early and often.
Can we change the state constitution so we can have three?
We can invite more people.
That's called districting and redistricting.
well, if we had Wilmington and Londonderry, are no longer part of Windham County for the Senate district because of population. So you could, instead of, I was part of redistricting, so you could, instead of having two people in Windham County, you could have had three and leave them and pull the population from someplace else. Pull the population. Windsor County has three because they have
Do they really? How many is Chittenden County?
six.
Yeah.
It's the largest single district in the United States.
Largest single district in terms of population?
No, in terms of,
In terms of
population and
Okay.
representatives, both, because it's based on
the
that.
United
So
States is full of so many things. I used to live in Plymouth, Massachusetts. It's twice the size of Manhattan. It's kind of hard to imagine.
I know.
Six senators from one district.
yeah. Imagine running up there. Because
I have a friend
you have
running
at least 18 or 25 people in every election.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Jeanette,
It's-
we're going to have to say goodbye.
Thank you so much for.
Thank you so much for coming. And
Yeah.
I'm
Thank you.
really looking forward to having you on this show in the future. All right, so we're down to two. And Becca, you look like you're waiting for something.
Yeah, I would love for the two of you to speak with us more about this tension around people who oppose wind power, talking about how it is not cheap, how it is more expensive.
dear.
And so I just want to get some of those facts out there, because I feel like it just keeps coming around.
Yes.
That without the subsidies, we wouldn't have any wind power. Without
Well,
this, we
that's
wouldn't.
true. Without the
Right.
subsidies, we wouldn't have any power.
Exactly. Well, that's it.
Say it again.
That's exactly it. And so how do you
The fossil,
so I would love to hear,
yeah,
you know.
the fossil fuel industry is getting something on the order of $525 billion a year just in subsidies worldwide.
Worldwide.
The UN has said this is a very big, very serious problem. Please, everybody, stop doing this. The World Health Organization has said we're losing over 3 million people a year to air pollution that is caused by the fossil fuel industry. There's other air pollution that's killing other people, but the fossil fuel industry is killing over 3 million people a year. And if you think about that in terms of a century, this is like much worse than the Second World War in terms of the number of people being killed. You've got disease. A lot of people are dealing with asthma. The cost of fossil fuels is huge. They are making a lot of money, huge amounts of money, and that's under threat. So of course they're saying anything that they can to get people to believe that wind power is not cheap.
Can I also just interject for a minute?
Yeah, absolutely.
We want to remind people that the Koch brothers are fossil fuel.
Yeah, the Koch brothers are fossil fuel.
Right.
They are fossil fuel.
That's right.
And they own the Republican Party.
Well, you know, I think they
I'm
own-
sorry, but I'm willing to say that, and I would say it if I were standing in the middle of the house down in Washington.
I believe you would, Joan.
And that their aggression
Yes,
is intense, and it's affecting us here in Vermont.
absolutely.
Yeah, it
Now, I
changes
will
the
tell you-
conversation on a local
I will
level.
tell you one
Yeah.
thing, and that is I think they don't own the Republican Party, but the result of that, I believe, is that the Republican Party is probably going to split. Because they own it effectively enough, particularly at the highest reaches, to I mean, you look at the way the Republicans vote in Washington, D.C., and they vote with the Koch industry people, and they are not representing the majority of their voters. I don't know that they're even representing the majority of the people in Congress in that party. There are a lot of people who know that there's a serious problem, and they're voting with the party. And it is that, I think, is a very big problem. You're
Yes.
absolutely right. But the other thing, Becca, is that wind, you know, the DOE just came up with this thing. Wind power is $25 a megawatt hour, average 2013, that's last year.
Right.
It's still going down. We got a thing today, was it today or yesterday, Tom, about the report on the people in the United States. 25%, 50% of the population of the United States will find it cheaper to buy rooftop solar and batteries for their houses than to be on the grid in under 3 years. We're already in Vermont in a place where the cheapest source of electricity we've got is solar.
As I said when I first came in here, the idea of paying for the fuel to provide your energy is going out the window. There's nothing we can do about it. It will happen.
It will
It's
happen.
going to take time.
The people like Koch Industries are in deep, deep trouble.
And they know it.
That's why they're reacting the way they are. Because there's, you know, in metaphorical terms, but not very far into metaphorical ground, there's a war going on. It's a war between people representing organizations like Koch Industries and ExxonMobil and Entergy and so forth, who are really into fossil fuels, including oil, coal, gas, and also nuclear.
Now, there's a word for what they're facing. It's called stranded assets.
Yes.
And it is hitting them square between the eyes now. What are we going to do about it? And the only thing they can do about it is what they're doing about it.
Well, people should be aware of this. They should be aware of what happens when you get a bunch of conservatives. And of course, it doesn't have to be conservatives. It could be anybody. In Australia, this is one of the news items we're going to go through today.
Yeah.
Queensland businesses with their own renewable resources are being hit with service charges of up to $500 a day on their electric bills in a move the solar industry says is designed to kill the rollout of commercial scale rooftop solar across the state. That's in Queensland, which is a big state in Australia.
This is the kind of stuff that's going on.
And what they've had is that and this is the state. It's a state-owned industry, which the commercial interests that are behind the fossil fuel industry in Australia, who are the power in Australia right now, they're hitting people with a percentage of their amount of power that they generate that is designed to give them the idea that they are saving money, but really hurt them badly in the process. So $500 a day.
So it's essentially a tax on what? On their use of the...
What happens is they're saying, okay, you've got PVs on your roof.
Right.
We're going to increase the service charge in order to make it profitable for the utility, which is owned by the state. They would
Right.
like to privatize it, but
Right.
it's owned by the state. Make it profitable for that to have you connected to the grid. So there's
It's a theoretical thing. We own all these poles and wires, and it costs us money
Right.
to service these things, and you're getting a free ride,
Right.
so we're going to put a service charge on here to balance it up. Of course, $500 a day is far more than balancing it.
Right.
It's punitive. It's
Yeah.
really
Right.
punitive.
It's intimidation.
It's intimidation,
Right.
and part of the reason this is happening is because in Australia, where the federal government and most or maybe all of the state governments are controlled by a group of people who are called the coalition. It's the coalition government. They are beholden to the coal industry primarily.
Well, it's a residue of how Australia developed. You don't think of Australia as a big manufacturing country, but you do think of mines in Australia. You know, they've always been,
Right.
and it's a wealthy
Extraction.
country.
Yeah, it's a big
They
extraction.
didn't get there by making transistor radios. They got there by mining.
Yeah.
So these people, and we're talking for generations after
Right.
generations, have migrated into positions of power. Families have positions
Sure.
of power, and they're still there.
Right.
And I think it's a fight to the end right now, because the state governments and the national government is controlled by these heavy financial interests. But the city interests, the town interests, don't seem to be. They're pretty progressive. So something's going to happen in Australia in the next few years.
And 10% of the people in the country have got solar panels on their roofs. And the companies are putting solar up because it's cheap.
Right.
And so the demand for electricity is declining. So they're trying to sell an old product,
Right.
coal, to an economy that has a shrinking market,
Right.
where they're under threat from
Right.
wind, which
Sure.
is cheaper, where they're under threat from solar, which is cheaper. And actually, that's what's happening in the United States, and to some extent, that's what's happening in Vermont. And we see people citing statistics or detailing information that's just flat out not true.
What is the percentage of Americans that use solar power at home?
I don't know.
Because 10% that's significant in Australia, and I would imagine we're
10%
not
is
anywhere near that
significant.
here.
No.
I don't think we are, but it's definitely growing
It's
fast.
Yeah.
probably about 0.5%, I would guess, in
Okay.
the United States. We're getting about, or more than that. We're getting something on the order of 1% of our electricity, a little bit less from solar right now, but that doesn't count off-grid. And off-grid is a big part of that market.
Sure.
And it doesn't even get itemized.
No, it
It's,
doesn't.
it's as if it doesn't
So
exist.
it's out there and we don't know about
That's
it.
right.
Okay.
It's,
And one of the things that's happening because of the costs diminishing for solar power,
Yeah.
more and more people are going to get off the grid. More so in Australia because it's so spread out.
When
But
you
it's going to
have-
happen here too.
when you have a $500 a day connect fee, you start thinking about batteries. Just disconnecting from the line.
Sure.
How many batteries can you buy for $500?
I don't know, but I can tell you, I'd be surprised if there weren't big, important industries in Australia that are just considering pulling off. Pulling away.
That's $15,000 in a month, right?
Well, one thing we got to be careful. This isn't going against the homeowners. They're not slapping homeowners for
Not for
$500.
$500.
No, I understand, but a business, $15,000 a month?
It's a
Yeah.
it's a lot of money,
You can start investing in some very nice batteries.
and that is happening.
Yes.
It's inevitable. It's pure
inevitable.
economics. Isn't
And
it?
it doesn't have to be batteries. There are other ways of doing the same things. I mean, you could take the excess power that comes from your solar that you've got on your roof and use it to generate hydrogen, which you use for making electricity at night. It's all, there are many, many ways.
So
of
many
doing it.
options.
There are a lot of options.
How could we solarize Main Street in Brattleboro?
There are a bunch of different ways. If you look at Brattleboro from above and you look at those rooftops, they're all pretty
They're all
flat.
flat.
Yeah.
And the one big problem with that is that we'd have to incentivize replacing the rooftops in some
Right.
cases, so that they could be putting solar panels on top of.
And a new roof.
Yeah, and one thing that we can thank Senator Galbraith for is the fact that we have an exemption that allows us to develop as much solar at the
The landfill.
landfill as we can, and have it included in the speed program. And then we've got, there's a lot of other things too. One of the things, I just happened to mention at a town meeting on one occasion was, look at the parking garage that stands between Flat Street and Elliott Street. The whole south face of that is unobstructed from the sun. That could be developed, even though it's a vertical wall.
Right.
It could be developed for solar. And if we had enough solar in Brattleboro, and we also developed biomass, for example, which could be, a biomass plant could be taking wood and making methane out of it. The methane can be stored, it can be used like natural gas. We could have local landfill natural gas, local agricultural natural gas, and we could be using that kind of thing. We could be producing all the power we need in Brattleboro. We are spending almost $25 million a year on electrical power. We're spending almost $25 million.
That's the town of Brattleboro.
Right.
Just in Brattleboro. Almost $25 million a year in heating fuel. And all of that could be locally generated power, locally generated heat, which means the money is local. It means the profits are local, the jobs are local, the taxes are local.
Right.
All of that could be developed.
So George, when are you going to run for office?
I've got an office.
Well, we appreciate you being an advisor.
Yeah, okay. I'm thrilled at the idea.
What's the status of the biomass? Isn't there a plant that is?
There's a plant is it one plant or two that I've been hearing about? I've been hearing about it from you, and I've been hearing about it from Tad Montgomery.
I've only seen the plan for one.
Okay.
Well, there's probably a plan. There's probably about 10 plans for biomass in Brattleboro right now.
But one that's really moving forward.
There is
one right now that's operating, Sersasimo.
Right.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Oh, right.
Brattleboro Kiln Drying is doing it.
Right.
But
that's affecting local farmers, I learned, who used to buy all their sawdust for bedding and that in the winters from Sersasimo, and now they're using it in this project.
I can believe that.
So they were paying, they were paying
They got a good price.
really excellent price, and now it's like quadrupled.
Yes.
Right.
None of
There's
this,
Here we go
unintended
again, right?
consequences, sure.
Yep.
none of
Right.
this stuff is something that is so simple. That
Right.
Well, the
A lot of it is pretty
Sersasimo's
simple.
have been good businessmen.
Yes.
They're not going to give something away if they can make something with it. I mean, that's why they got into the mulch business.
Sure.
You
There you
know, they're sort of like the old stockyards in Chicago, where they use everything from the pig but the squeal.
Okay.
I like that. Yeah.
Okay.
But it is. That's where it gets so thorny, right? Because you certainly don't want to.
Right.
But we know for any
Yep.
production of any energy, there are going to be costs,
There are
right?
going
And
to
so
be
you have to
trade-offs.
weigh those within the community
You
and
can
the
also
state.
look at it this way: the farmers were getting a real deal for a long time.
Sure. Yeah. Right.
Well, that's
Well,
like-
depending on
right.
what lens you're looking
Yeah,
through.
yeah.
Well, I was talking to a woman from Vernon who said, Joni, we loved living here before VY. We will love living here again after VY.
Right,
This is a woman who's like third generation from Vernon.
right.
She goes, people forget how wonderful this community was and how much we helped each other.
Right.
Yes, we have less money now, but I got to tell you, this is a
Interesting
community
point.
that has always supported and been interconnected. Then she just smiled and,
Right. We reinvent ourselves.
Exactly.
Right, and I think that's a really important thing. One of the things that I've heard is that Mary Powell regards her job first and foremost as being finding a new business plan.
This was the head of Green Mountain Power.
Right.
And this is because of the combination of influences on that, which includes climate change, and it also includes peak oil, and it also
Right.
includes, a lot of different things. They have an easier time of it because they are getting much of their power from hydro in Canada. And, but she wants, if you think about Green Mountain Power and the fact that they are helping people put solar panels on their rooftops So they won't be buying power from Green Mountain Power. Where does this come from? And it's like they're helping people with efficiency and so forth. There's a partnership going on between Green Mountain Power and NeighborWorks of Western Vermont, which applies to the entire area of Green Mountain Power where that service is being done. NeighborWorks will supply financing for any efficiency or renewable energy. This is my understanding. Any efficiency or renewable energy project that a person might have, the money comes out of a revolving fund, so when you pay it off, it goes into somebody else's similar project. And Green Mountain Power is helping do that, even though they're losing a certain amount of their customer base for electricity. What is happening, and this is something that they're doing, and I'm seeing a term start to appear in the news, which is energy management. Instead of utility, you're talking about an energy manager. And Green Mountain Power wants to be the organization that you pay to for that financing, and then they repay NeighborWorks. You see, so they're going to be in a situation where they're going to be financing the conversion away from, I'm going to say foreign, meaning outside of Vermont, but certainly outside of the United States. The people in Canada have got lots of places they can sell hydropower to.
Sure.
But Green Mountain Power wants to be in that as a manager, and you know, I've talked about microgrids. Somebody's got to keep those microgrids connected.
Right.
Somebody's got to manage all of that. And there's going to be money to be made there.
Yeah.
So.
And they have the technology.
They have the technology.
The technology and the know-how.
And then we've got other things too that, you know, we haven't even touched on about this, like the possibility of a solar storm shutting the country down for 4 years.
Shudder. I mean,
really, this is scary.
There is, I think, something like a 40% chance of that happening within the next 10 years.
I didn't hear that it was that high. But the
number 40% is right. The only question I have is how many years that covers, but that's a scary number.
It is. You know, what happened was about, what was it, last spring? I think it was early last spring or late last winter. 2 reports came out, and this was not very long after the North Koreans said, if we set off a bomb in space above your country, it'll shut you down. I think it was the Pentagon or the Homeland Security came up with a figure that if terrorists took out 8 specific targets in the United States, which were transmission stations, and 1 factory, if they could successfully take those out, none of them was defended, it would shut down the American grid completely for a year and a half.
Well, our electric grid is hopelessly low.
Oh my God. Yes.
And the other one, which I think is even scarier, because there's not a lot that you can do about it except just prepare, and we can prepare the grid for this. NASA issued a report saying that we had missed by 6 days in terms of our position in the orbit around the sun a solar ejection mass, which would have shut down the entire country for up to 4 years. And by the entire country, I mean the electric grid goes down, and it's going to be just trying to piece it back together, one piece at a time, until we get it back together. So it might be months before anybody has any power, but it would be 4 years before everybody does.
The vulnerable point there is these giant transformers that they need. They only need a very few of them, but you don't buy them off the shelf. And if they fry, there's nobody in America makes them. So you'd have to get them from Europe or Asia. And those guys are going to be busy.
Yeah.
So that's where the 4 years is coming from.
Because the coronal ejection mass would probably knock out half the world.
It could
possibly
very well.
More.
Yeah, it could very well.
Possibly more. And
which comes back to why we want to be locally self-dependent.
That's why I think it's important for every community in Vermont to have its own resources. Because once you're past that big transformer, you're in a position, and there are things that you have to do. You have to, every computer in the country could be affected by this permanently. Where the chips are just fried, it has to be replaced. Who's going to do that?
Cell phones too.
Cell phones. You know, if the computers are fried, that means most of the cars we have won't run. If the cars won't run, who delivers oil to the nuclear power plant that needs oil to keep its
Your car will
cooling
run.
system going?
So I'm
keeping
sitting
that
here thinking about
Diesel. That bends.
how can we leverage the post-VY money, revolving loan fund, for some of these projects. I'm sitting here, I'm still, a few minutes ago, I'm imagining the side of the transportation center covered in solar panels.
Yeah.
And, right, and so I know the governor is very keen on that money being used for immediate job creation. And sometimes when you're talking about installation of solar panels, you know, they're temporary jobs, right?
No, they're permanent jobs, and I'll tell you why.
Yep, tell me.
Because you install them, and then you go to the next installation job. We have got a huge job in front of us, getting solar panels. We could go for 20 years on solar panels and wind turbines and not finish.
Well, that's my question. So, and then when thinking ahead to how do we recreate, reinvent the economy post VY in Windham County, how does it tie into becoming more local in the way that power is produced, right? And so it allows us to imagine job creation in a different way if you then have the power that you're creating in town. So it takes a little bit more of a forward-thinking leap of faith, but how can that money be used for these long-range goals of power generation and job creation? So
now, I have to stop you because we're at the end of our hour.
Okay.
And we are, aren't we, Tom?
I haven't been far.
I think we started at about 15:15.
We started late, I know, but it's late now.
I believe we're about the end of our hours. They'd like us to stop before the hour is up. So we're going to have to say goodbye to everybody who's watching this discussion, which I have found fascinating. But we will continue because we're doing the discussion part first today, and the news is coming second. And I don't know how the people at BCTV are going to manage that.
They'll figure it out.
They know how to do everything down there. So what we're going to do now is just continue.
That's a good idea.
Okay. So
So I love what Becca was saying. I mean, she's a very forward thinker.
Yes.
Thank you, Joan.
I've enjoyed, I just want to say how much I've enjoyed being in this campaign.
I'm glad.
And spending time with Becca has really,
I agree.
you're great.
Thank you.
And she really does.
Spending time with you is what I agree with. I agree. Your spending time with me has been great. No, I think we've learned a lot from each other.
I have learned a lot from Becca, and I like the way she thinks. She's very strategic, and she thinks about how do we create these projects, how do we fund them.
Yeah.
She asks really good questions, and I like. Can we continue with the questions she asks? Because it's really.
Unfortunately, no. We've got to go to the news, and as soon as we're done with the news, we can do that. But Becca, I think, is going to have to leave.
Be somewhere at noon.
Anyway, here we are. This is a new Energy Week show. So
It is that.
welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Energy Week with George Harvey and Tom Fennell. And today we have Joan Bownman and Becca Balint, who are running for office for senator. And I want to remind everybody that the primary is on Tuesday, the 26th, and I brought this in just so everybody can see it. We have ballots available for anybody who can't vote on Tuesday that are absentee ballots, and be sure you follow the instructions on that, because if you don't, your votes will be cast out. You want to use only one of the 4 ballots available, and you do not want to mark any of the others, and you have to return them. So just follow the instructions on the envelope. You can get them from the town clerk in Brattleboro. We spin and we toil, we work all day, sowing and reaping, we store goods away, so we can be dressed well on the day that we die. We dig and drill and waste what we find, break up the earth, leaving little behind, but we will grow lilies in the by and by. I want to point out that the sun shines down its power to all the world, and makes the wind blow strong as it will. I want to hope gentle rains can fall upon the land, so lovely earth can stay lovely still.